Hey, good morning. Okay, we pick up 102a, 12 lines down. Tanya Namihachi. So we're continuing to discuss the source of the Isurim of Ever Minachai and Basar Minachai. Tanya Namihachi, we have a brisa. Ever Minachai noig bebehema chai va'of. Ever Minachai applies to animals, domesticated animals, wild animals, and birds. Bein Tmei Bein Tahara, whether it's kosher or not kosher. Shenemar, Rak Chazak Levilti Achol Adam. The source is this pasuk, be strong not to eat the blood, and then it continues, V'lo Tuchal HaNefesh Im HaBasar. Um, so Kol Shata Mitzuva Al Domo, Ata Mitzuva Al Eivarav. So there's a link between the Isur of dam, of blood, and eating Aver Min HaChai. So any animal that you can't eat its blood, you can't also eat Aver Min HaChai from it. If there's no prohibition of eating the blood, then there's no prohibition of Aver Min HaChai. But the rabbis say, no, Aver Min HaChai applies only to kosher animals. Shenemar, lo tuchal nefesh im habasar. What's their source? Don't eat the life with the meat. Ella, so so that implies that you can't eat the meat only when it's alive. El abasar lechude, but the in other words, you can eat the meat by itself if it's dead. If you're not taking the life, okay, I'm bumbling here a little bit. You can't eat the meat if you're taking the life at the same time. But if it's already dead, then you can eat it. Kosher b'sara mutar. So therefore, what we get from that, anything that you're allowed to eat, kosher animal, atmatzuv alivarv. That's where even the chai applies. Kosher ein b'sara mutar and atmatzuv alivarv. But if there's no prohibition of eating, it's a kosher. If there is, sorry, if you're not allowed to eat the meat at all, in other words, the animal's not kosher, and there's no Aver Min HaChai problem. Rameir says the third opinion, only applies to kosher animals. Okay, so he's excluding birds and chaya. Why? Amar Rabba Bar Shmuel Amar Rabbi Chiza Vitem Rabbi Yosef V'Amrei La Amar Rabba Bar Shila Amar Rabbi Chiza Vitem Rabbi Yosef V'Amrei La Rabba Bar Shimi Amar Rabbi Chiza Vitem Rabbi Yosef. So it's very unclear who's the source is, but anyway, whoever said this, my Talmud Rav Meir. What's Rav Meir's reason? That's only behema tahara that Aver Min HaChai applies to. Amar Krav V'Zavachta Mibkarecha Umitzoncha. You can slaughter from your in the context of this prohibition is that you can eat when you slaughter from your cattle and your sheep. Okay, and those are kosher animals, so it's only kosher animals that he said this applies to. That's where the mitzvah or the isur of Aver Min HaChai is stated.
So it wouldn't apply to insects, like for instance, the grasshoppers, which are actually a kosher animal. So that if you were to one were to tear off the limb of that would be acceptable. That you could do that, right?
Seems like yes. Yes, I don't think anybody says it applies to an insect. So we haven't seen that anyway, but yeah, certainly the most expansive definition is it applies to behema chayva, and that seems to exclude insects. Amar Rav Gidol Marav, machlokas b'Yisrael. We're only talking about this machlokas about who it applies, which kind of animal it applies to, is only about Jews. Okay, Ava Ben Noach, who as we know is commanded, is liable for Aver Min HaChai. Then everybody says, no, kosher animals, non-kosher animals, doesn't matter. A non-Jew can't eat Aver Min HaChai from any of them. Tanya Namihachi, we have a brisa that supports that. Aver Min HaChai, Ben Noach Musar Alav Al Tmeim Katahorim. It says explicitly in this brisa, a Ben Noach is prohibited from Aver Min HaChai for both kosher and non-kosher animals. But Jews only kosher animals does it apply to. Now, of course, the Jew can't eat a non-kosher animal either, but not because if he eats Aver Min HaChai from a non-kosher animal, he doesn't get that additional according to this view, it doesn't get that additional prohibition. Ikadi Amri, or some read this, Tahora, Rabbi Meir, Tahora, Rabbi Meir. So you could read this brisa two ways. One way is it's according to Rabbi Meir, and it's only talking about the tahara, but the kosher animal, the behema itself. Ikadamri tahorim v'rabanan, or it could be all kosher animals, including behema chai v'yof, and it goes according to the opinion of the rabbanon. But the point is that a Jew is only prohibited from Avim Minachai for something that is that for a limited subset of all living things. Amar Rav Shizvi. Often on Amitanina, we have another support. If you eat, it's talking about a non-kosher bird. So if you eat every minachai from a non-kosher bird, and it's also there's no malchus. V'ein shchita metaharta, and shchita doesn't make it kosher for eating. But what are we talking about? This last thing, Eli Yisrael. If we're talking about a Jew, shchita metaharta, then of course, shchita doesn't make it. If we're talking about a non-kosher bird, it doesn't matter if you do shchita. So what must be talking about? Ben Noach, that it's saying that if you ate Avim min achai, it doesn't matter if you then later kill the bird. Okay, it's still the Avim min achai was still prohibited. Michlal daser, so that
But
implies.
doesn't shchita mitaharta, doesn't that the Gemara earlier said that takes this out of the category of nevela, that the one doesn't become tame by that animal. And the
Yeah, so
Gemara
I don't think it
specifically
means.
doesn't talk about eating. The Gemara there excludes the whole concept of eating. It's referring to tuma.
Well, so it seems like not. It seems like what we're talking about here, taharta, isn't it technical, tahar or tame in a technical sense. It means make it permissible or not permissible. It seems to be what, from the context, what it means here. So yeah, you
Permissible
have a
for
good
eating.
point. It's not a well-chosen word, metaharta, but it seems to mean makes it kosher to eat, or permissible to eat.
Yeah, that was clearly not the sense of the Gemara in the earlier.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, earlier we were talking specifically indeed about Tumantara. Here we're talking about whether it's permissible to eat. I mean, Ben Noach, it doesn't. There's no Tumantara regarding Ben Noach. The whole concept doesn't apply to Ben Noach. So Mataharta must mean, if we're talking about Ben Noach, must mean makes it permissible. Um, so in other words, if the Ben Noach took Aver Minachai and then killed the bird, that doesn't make the Aver Minachai kosher for him. Michal de Aser. So that means that shows you that the since we're talking about a bird and we're talking about a ben noach, it shows that the Aver Minachai for a is prohibited to a ben noach. Um, okay, Rav Mandi
Well,
Bar
what difference does
Pach.
it make to say that he would kill it later? Once he's taken the Aver Menachai, how can he now make it no longer Aver Menachai? What's done
Well,
is done.
you might say it's not high anymore, so now it's permitted. But no, that's not the case. Is what the Bryce is saying.
Well, chronologically, it doesn't make sense either because he's
Yeah,
already
okay. So, well,
taken.
you're agreeing with the Bryce, right?
Right.
Yeah. Ramani Barpatish Rami Reisha Seifa. Ramani Barpatish says, there's a contradiction here between the beginning of the Mishnah and the end of the Mishnah. How so? The the beginning says that Avram Achai doesn't apply to non-kosher birds, and the end of the Mishnah says it seems like it does apply. Mishana, he answers Reisha B'Yisrael v'Sefer B'Ven Noach. The beginning of the Mishnah is talking about excuse me, about a Jew. So when it says "Achal from Menachem in the Sofa Garbaim," it's talking about a Jew. That there's no malchus for a Jew eating from Avram Menachem from a bird. Um, and the end of the Mishnah is saying Vein Shchita Metaharta is talking about a Ben Noach. Amar Rav said. Avram Achai Sarich Kazayas. In order to violate Avram Achai, it has to be a Kazayas of meat. Um, Well, it doesn't say meat. We'll see in a minute. Uh, it has to be a kazayis of Avery Nachai. My tama, why? Achila ksiva be, because it says don't eat it. It's talking about eating, and anything eating is a kazayis. Masiv Rav Amram, Sir Rav Amaras, Achal Avery Nachai mimena. If you eat Avery Nachai from this non-kosher bird, and suffix there's no malchos, fein shchita mitaharta, and killing the bird afterwards doesn't help. Visakadatach v'inon kazayis. If you think you need a kazayis to um, to be over. So typically the kachil kazayis. Um, One second. So the Mishnah must be talking about that you ate a kazayis. So um, so at the end of the Mishnah when it says ein shchita mitzaharta, um, one second. Oh, we're talking about a non-kosher bird, right? Um, so it must be the Mishnah is talking about where you ate a kazayas, right? Because in the end of the Mishnah it says "Shlita mataharta," that you're dealing with something that needs to be made kosher again. Uh, so we must be talking about eating a kazayas, right? Kedam Rav Nachman.
But it says Isach that Einan Kazayah.
So the beginning of the Mishnah says that if that a Jew is not chayav um, for eating Avrim Chai from a non-kosher bird. Okay, um, now we must be talking about eating a kazayis because otherwise, the beginning of the Mishnah you wouldn't be chayav for eating non-kosher if it were less than a kazayis. So
Less
it must be a kazayis.
less than a Kazayah, one is not Chayav.
Right,
For Malkut. For
right.
Malkut.
Right. So we must be talking about where you're eating a kazayas, and then in the Seifa, in the end of the Mishnah, then um, then like how can you not be liable, right? Um, because you ate the kazayas of a non-kosher bird. So you have to say that you're getting malchus, right? Maybe not for Avrim Achai, but for eating non-kosher. So our answer is Kediyam Rav Nachman, B'mashu, Basar, Gidin, Vatsamos. Um, if you're eating a mix of not just meat, but also sinews and bones, um, so the sinews and bones by themselves, that's not you wouldn't be chayav for eating non-kosher meat, but you would be chayav for Avram Minachai. So in other words, uh, Avram Minachai applies to all parts of the animal, including eating vatsamos, and eating non-kosher meat only applies to meat. So hachaname b'mashu basar
Doesn't
gidin
apply
vatsamos.
to oath.
Uh, Sorry, say again.
Does it not apply to oath as well? It said non-kosher meat.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess.
that's what I meant. Yeah, bird meat, right? Chicken.
Oh, it's what about a behemoth?
Well, but this mission is talking about
Oh, the
a
Mishnah is
bird.
talking only about oath.
Yeah.
Well,
Tashma, we have another proof. The Yamar Rav. Rav says, "Ochal sipar tahara b'chayal." If you eat from a bird, from a kosher bird while it's alive, b'chol shehu, then it's Ever Minachai, even if it's less than the kazayas. B'misasa, but if you eat it after it's dead, b'kazayas, then it's a different Easter. It's an Easter of not of no, here it's a kosher bird.
it's a kosher bird.
Yeah. Um, so, uh, so what he's saying is that after it dies, now it's no longer Avram Minachai, which is different than what we said before about Ben Noach. All right, but this is what Rav is saying, that if after it dies, then then you're only chayiv if you eat a kazayis.
For
Um,
what? The bird is kosher.
yeah, but the Avram Minachai still applies. Sorry, no, then
No,
it
it's
becomes
not,
a
but it's
nevela.
dead.
No,
Wait,
then it
wait.
becomes a nevela because
Nevela.
it didn't have shchita, right? So then the prohibition is different, and kazayis applies. So basically saying that kazayis doesn't apply to Ever Minachai, but it does apply to nevela, eating a kosher bird that was not shechted properly. Utmeya, but a
So what's
non-kosher
it?
bird.
Well, what is it for Eber Menachai? It's a mashahu, like Pesach.
Yeah, that's what he
It's
says.
just-
B'chol shehu. Yeah, even a small amount. Um, and as we'll see in a minute, we're talking about eating the whole bird. So it has to be a very small bird. We'll deal with that in a minute. Um, so I think so the fact that he's chayav for a small amount could be because he's eating the entire creature, all the meat from the bird, even though it's less than the kazayas. Okay. Utmea, what about a non-kosher bird? Bein b'chayav, bein b'misasa b'chal shehu. Then you're chayav for even eating a small amount, whether it's alive or dead. Okay, so if it's a kosher a bird, then the small amount of meat makes you over. But a non-kosher bird, um, sorry, the kosher bird, the Aver Minachai, the small amount only makes you liable while it is alive. Okay, a non-kosher bird doesn't matter. So, but before Rav said that you need a kazayis um, from the living animal, right, from the living bird. So Gemara says,
So the
Hachaname.
non-kosher verse. What do we say about the non-kosher? That it's. I mean, Eber Menachai. If it's not alive, there's no Eber Menachai, right? The even non-kosher bird.
Correct.
So was it to me a ben b'chayel ben b'mitata b'chol. But it's not a. Oh, but it's a non-kosher bird.
Yeah,
So
because then the problem is that it's not kosher. That you didn't
right.
have didn't
Okay.
have shechita, right? Oh
Right.
no, sorry, that it wasn't a kosher species. Yeah, it wasn't a kosher species. So Gemara says, "Hachanami mashu basar eating matzah." So you can answer this by saying that maybe there was only a small amount of meat, but if you combine it with the rest of the bird, the eating and and everything else, then it is a kazaya. So that's why you're chayav. That's why you're chayav.
Because,
Um,
but we said you don't need a kazite if it's. Didn't we say that? No. You don't need a kazite if it's a.
what Rav is saying is that in order to be chayav malchus for Ever Minachai, you have to eat a kazayis. And then we're seeing other brises that we have to explain. Is that really the case, or do we have to restrict what it's talking about? Tashma, here's another brisa. No tal tzipor shein bo kazayis. You have a small bird. It doesn't have a kazayis of meat. V'achalo. And you ate it, the whole thing. Rabbi Poter. Rabbi says it's less than a kazayis, not a problem. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, chayav. Lazar, Rabbi Shimon says no. You ate the whole bird. You're chayav. Amar Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, kal v'chomer. Wait a minute. There's a kal v'chomer. Al aver mimena chayav. If you only ate a part of the bird, right, while it was alive, then you'd be chayav. Even if it's less than a kazayis. Al kulo lo kol shekain. Now you're eating the whole bird. Certainly, you should be chayav. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. Chanaka v'achala, the continuation of the bride. So if you choke the bird and then you eat it, divrei akol b'kazayis. Then it's definitely kazayis because it was already dead. So now it's just a nevela. Adkan lo plige, the machokas is only the marsavar b'chayel levarim umedes, umarsavar b'chayel lav levarim umedes. That while it's alive, do we see it as a collection of avarim or do we see it as a whole animal? So if you so Rabbi holds that if it's alive, it's all considered a whole animal. And the other one, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon says no, it's already seen as a collection of avarim. But both of them agree you don't need a kazayas if you eat one piece of the animal, one aver. So isn't that against what Rabbi said? Like it seems like um, that that it doesn't matter if it's a kazayas or not, right? It's the question is if you ate the whole thing or not. Amar Rav Nachman b'mashu basar gidim vatzamas. Again, we could say it's
I'm going
talking
to say
about
it doesn't matter.
small
You have
amount
to
of
eat the
meat.
whole
It's
thing.
less than the kazayas of meat, but the whole thing adds up to a kazayas. So now we're getting to the question of what kind of bird are we talking about? Mika mide the bechule leis be kazayis basar. Is there such a bird that doesn't even have a kazayis of meat if you eat the whole thing? Uvachad ever is kazayis b'mashu basar gidin basamos. And it's such a small bird, and yet there's a kazayis when you combine only a part of it, one aver, one limb from it, even together with the sinews and bones, it wouldn't make up a kazayis either. What kind of bird is that? Amar Shravya, Bekalnisa. Yes, here's a bird like that, a something called a kalnisa. So it must have a a very high ratio or a very low ratio of meat to other body parts. Okay, so there's not a kazayas in the whole thing, but if you just rip off a wing, or I don't know, wing, whatever, you rip off a part of it, then the bones are so sturdy or so voluminous, or the other parts, the non-meat parts, are so voluminous that it does make a kazayas even with a tiny bit of meat. Um, okay, so
But
the
if
Gemara
one
says,
takes it, so what? In that case, you take Abram Menachai, it takes up, then it will be less than a kazayit, right? You take because whole bird is a kazayit.
right.
So then, if he
Um,
takes part of it, then it's and doesn't eat the
So
rest of it, then it's
the whole bird has meat less than the kazayas, but a part of it could have a kazayas when you combine it with all the bird parts, all the meat and the sinews and the bones.
oh, so with the bird is itself is more than kazayit.
Yeah. So ema seifa. Um, but then if we're talking about the kalnisa, what about the seifa? Chanaka v'achala, if you choke the bird, you killed it, but without shchita, and you ate it, v'achala, divrei akol b'kazayis. Then everybody says it has to be kazayis. V'ha kalnisa of tamehu. Wait a minute, kalnisa is not a kosher bird. V'yamar Rav, tmei ben b'chaya ben b'mizasa b'mashu. Rav says, if we're talking about the kalnisa, then how does it make sense to say that ben b'chaya ben b'misasa, whether it's alive or dead, b'mashu, that you're liable for eating only a small amount. Why does it need a kazayas? Ela ke'ein kalnisa. No, we're talking about a kosher bird that's like the kalnisa. The Gemara couldn't identify a particular species, kosher species, that has these characteristics, very little meat relative to the amount um, of other material. But there is such a bird, and we're talking about a kosher bird that has those characteristics.
But I think the whole bird is less than a kazayit, isn't it? The chule late bay
The meat
kazayit.
of the whole bird, the meat of the whole bird is less than kazayas. Yes,
Oh,
right?
the just the meat.
Yeah,
Late
but
bay
you could have a
kazayit
kazayas
basar.
of bird in just one aver.
Oh, because you're including the atzamot.
Yes, exactly. Right. Amar Rava. Um, Imtim Salomar, if you say, Sava Rabbi Machshavas Ochlin Shma Machshava, that it makes a difference how you view the food, right? How a person views the food makes a difference. So chishav laochla ever v'chala kula. If you were thinking, I'm going to eat this bird piece by piece, and then you ended up you ate the whole thing. Um, you ate the whole thing at once, chayav. Then Rabbi would say that you're chayav because we view it as having eaten it as an aver at a time. Amalei bayumi kamide deilo achile acher lo mechayev achile hai mechayev. How can you say that? You're saying that I look at this bird as a collection of parts, so it is forbidden for me, and you look at it as a whole bird. Um, and so it's not, so it's okay for you to eat the parts of Amalei, zelafi machshavta, zelafi machshavta. Indeed, every person is judged according to the way he views things. So he doesn't kind of, uh, he's not really answering the question. He's just affirming that yes, that's the case. That you and I can be chayiv in different ways depending on how we consider what we think about the food.
But
Um,
isn't he chayav in if he's eating piece by piece, right?
so
So
if you
that's
eat the
Abraham.
whole thing, then it's not Aver Minachai, Rebbe says.
But suppose the bird is alive.
Still, then you're just chayiv for a non-kosher bird, but not Aver Minachai because you ate the whole thing.
And that would be who said that? Rebbe? And what Abai said
You
no?
could say, even according to Rebbe, you could say, yeah, indeed, this apparent um, this apparent paradox is indeed a paradox. It's the case that you can be chayiv differently than somebody else based on how you view the food that you're eating.
So a buyer might say, if I got this right, a buyer that it would be considered Eber Machai if he ate the whole bird. Is that what a buyer's opinion?
By saying according to Rabbi, well, Abaye would say that what you're proposing in Rebbe's name doesn't make sense, and Rava says yes, it does. It's fine. Like I don't care that it doesn't make sense.
That is seriously strange.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of anything kind of parallel. Um,
Well, that would actually, so a practical application might be gelatin. If you consider gelatin to be food,
mhm.
it's not going to be kosher mostly. But if you consider gelatin to not be food,
Right, but those who say that it is food and you can't eat it say that applies to everybody. It doesn't matter you consider it's food and I don't consider it's food. That's not the criteria.
but
We're
th
trying to establish a common criteria for everybody.
but this would seem to go against that.
No, I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, uh, if your thought about whether something is food matters,
Yeah,
yeah. Anyway, we dealt with this a couple days ago.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay. By the way, Charlie's put in the chat a
The smallest
very
bird.
small bird.
Yeah, the
Okay.
smallest bird known to exist.
Uh-huh. But is the whole bird a kazayas?
It may well not have a kazayit of meat. It's 2.5 inches long.
Uh-huh. Okay, so yeah, definitely not a kazayas of meat, but the
So
whole
this
bird
may
would be a kazayas.
nobody
Okay.
in it, nobody in Israel would have known about it because it's native to the Caribbean, but
Right.
it is a tiny, tiny bird.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you. Okay, V'yamarava.
There anyone
Imtim.
that would hold, according to this discussion here, that bird, if one ate it all at once, it would be considered Eber Menachai?
So that's the machlokas between Rabbi and Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. V'yamarava. Imtim salamar. If you want to say, Savar Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon machshavas ochlin shema machshava, that makes a difference how you consider it. Chishav la'ochla mesa v'chala chaya. What if you planned to eat it only after it died, but turned out it was still alive when you ate it? Potter, then Rabbi Elazar would say that yeah, you're not chayav because you considered this as it were a dead bird. Amalei Abayim Yikamide Dilu Achille Acher L'Chayev Achille Hi Potter. Same question. What? Because you intended to eat it only after it's dead. Because you intended to eat it in its death, you're okay. But me, who saw that it was still alive and I plan to eat it now, it would be us. Or like, how does that make sense? Indeed, it makes a difference what your plan was, what you planned to do. Okay. Now, now we're going to deal with what is the source of what's the source in the Torah for Aver Minachai as opposed to meat from a living animal if it's not kosher. Amar Rav Yochanan. Excuse me. Lo tochal nefesh basar. One pasuk says, "Don't eat the life with the meat." Ze'ever Minachai. That's the prohibition of Aver Minachai. Um, Another pasuk is don't eat meat that's torn in the field. That is meat from a living animal and also meat from a treifa, from an animal that's killed without shechita. Right? For Rav Shimon ben Lachi Shamar, Lo tochel nefesh im habasar. The first pasuk, don't eat the life with the meat. That applies to Zever min achai, ubasar min achai. That applies to Aver min achai and meat from achai. Ubasar basar treifa lo tochelu. The other pasuk is basar min treifa. That's meat from a treif animal, from a non-shechted animal.
Why isn't that a novella?
Why is it not an avela? Um,
Well, if the animal's dead, it would be.
Yeah. Yeah, we're talking about an animal that is dying, I guess. Um,
I'm assuming if you find the animal dead in the field, it's an
no,
event.
we're talking about an animal that's dying. So
It's
if
not
it's
dead yet.
not viable, then shechita doesn't help you, right? So that's a
Right.
separate.
That would
Um,
be it. If you check, so if it's dying and you checked it, it's a treifa. But if you let it die before you eat it, it's a nevela.
right.
Or you shechted.
But Abraham her high in a animal that isn't dead yet
Right.
is
So
an
you
issue.
could say that a treifa is like as if it's already dead. So that is requires perhaps a separate prohibition. It's not that wouldn't count as Avram Achai because it's a dying animal.
Hmm.
So that's why it requires a separate prohibition.
But it's not yet an avela, right?
Right. Achal Avram Achai, Ubasar Min Achai. What if you eat both, Erev Achai and meat from a chai? Rabbi Yochanan Chayav Shtayim. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you're violating two different prohibitions, so you get malchus twice. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish and Chayav Elachos. You're violating the prohibition that comes from one source, one pasuk, so you only get lashes once. And achal basar min achai ubasar min atrefa. What if you eat meat from a living animal and meat from a treifa? Or Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish chayav shtayim. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, that's from two different psukim. Rabbi Yochanan chayav elachos. Rabbi Yochanan is only one from one pasuk, so you can only be liable once. Achal even achai ubasar min atrefa. But if you eat ev min achai and meat from a treifa, l'divrei hakol chayav shtayim, then you're definitely violating two different psukim. According to both versions, both views. We're minhu, so we ask a question. Where's a good place to stop here? I guess we'll pick it up here tomorrow. We'll go back to yeah, we'll stop here and pick up
What's
this
what's
questioning
the
tomorrow.
what's the machlokas between Yochanan and Reb Shimon ben Lakish then?
Where you have three prohibitions and two psukim. So which pasuk covers two prohibitions and which covers one?
And how many lashes do you get?
If you violate both, both of
Yeah.
them or all of them. Yeah.
So one thing we didn't talk about is does Abraham high apply to fish?
We did not see any such view, right? It was Behema Chayv was the most expansive view that we saw.
Yeah, because there is a fish that would not have been known to anybody in the time of the Talmud,
Yeah.
that does have limbs. I don't know whether it's kosher or not, but I just put a link in the chat.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
Yeah, it has real limbs, unlike most fish. It has scales, but they may not be the scales that are accepted as kosher.
Full accounts.
It was thought to have gone extinct 66 million years ago, and then they found one in the 1930s.
Hmm. Let's see.
And if you click on the picture, it clearly has scales, but they may not be the kind of scales that we accept as kosher.
Uh-huh.
But even so,
Interesting.
it would still be an issue for non-Jews if Abraham Achai applies to fish.
Huh. Um, yeah, but we haven't seen any view that it does.
We haven't seen anything.
Yeah. Okay. We'll see you all tomorrow. Have a good day.
Thank you, Yashikar.